Let's get all racing car tech today and figure out how we can make your MOPAR handle better. Jump in this thing and see what it'll do.
Ready to rock this, bro?
Oh, hell yeah. Yep, I've been working on patina, got the drivetrain back in it, doing a few little things to it, upgrades here and there. This is gonna be like patina 3.0, but this video today isn't really to talk too much about in-depth on patina. This is to educate you guys on control arm angles, roll center, geometry, and all those little invisible things that make your car handle better, and why the designers and engineers in the 50s, 60s, and pretty much everything before that sucked. Yeah, these things were not meant to handle good. They were pretty much just meant to go in a straight line at 55 miles per hour. Of course, the NASCAR guys got in there, finagled with a few things, changed some numbers here and there, and got these things to run pretty good. But even at that time, when our famous B-body Mopars were in NASCAR, a lot of the guys were not aware of roll center, geometry, the center of gravity, all of that stuff that we're going to talk about today. All right, here's my quick education on roll center, roll couple, and center of gravity on trying to improve the control arm angles on our Mopars. Yes, they have a high center of gravity, big engines, all steel up high. You know, they weren't exactly built to be super lightweight, agile racing cars, but we can make them react like one if we spend the time to do the suspension work. So, center of gravity. Let's just guesstimate and put our center of gravity at, intake manifold height, or the plenum. And then I know, because I've mapped out the roll center on these cars, the stock roll center on a already lowered Mopar is right at the bottom of the K-frame, right in the middle. It's right there. It's the invisible pivot point between the relation of the control arms and the tires. And so if we have a center of gravity that high and we have a roll center that low, and this is our roll couple, the relation between the two, we now have a huge mechanical leverage to add to the body roll. But if we can raise the roll center, which is changing the geometry of the control arms, we are then shortening the gap between the center of gravity and the roll center. So now there's less mechanical leverage to give you body roll. I just thunked at that. That was kind of smart, huh? I almost made myself look intelligent. So since I have almost made myself look intelligent, let me describe something that I have created and going to sell that will make your guys' cars handle better and make the suspension all around functional better and take some of the bind out of it. It'll give you camber gain. It'll allow you more suspension travel, and it'll give you more tire patch. So, and it's something as simple as this little doohickey right here. All this is just a plate that's gusseted. Yes, I know it's simple, but it dropped the lower ball joint 1.5 inches. And the reason I went with 1.5 inches is Mopars have a really short low side on the spindle. I mean, the top side's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But the bottom side, the ball joint is almost next to the pin. Now I have created a crude illustration to explain to you what is going on here. So we have the stock spindle. That's the pin that holds the tire with the rotor and all that crap. We have this is going to be the lower ball joint, which lower ball joint pivot point. That little dot right there is going to be the center of the lower ball joint. We have the center of the upper ball joint. Now, with a stock car, stock suspension, and which if you lower your car, this is to kind of simulate that problem, which a lowered car you want for handling, right? Yes. And as the suspension compresses and as you get a little bit of body roll, what happens with stock suspension is this tire will actually camber out, which is no buenos because it creates a horrible tire patch on the ground. Another problem it does is it gives you terrible roll center. So this is, on a lowered car, the lower control arm angle, which if you take the pivot point to pivot point, that straight line is actually uphill towards the tire. And as the suspension compresses, well, this is going to go like this. Then what that will do, so it takes the spindle and does that with it. Now this is all with body roll and suspension compression involved. Another problem is mechanical leverage. Now if we looked at this, now obviously we're looking at it from the side. Now the lower ball joint is closer to the center of the pin for the tire. So with lateral load going on the tire, either this way or this way, right or left, the angle of the lower control arm and the load is going to have more of an effect on the suspension and the body than the upper will, because this is closer to the center point. That's a closer gap from there to there than it is from there to there. So that has more mechanical leverage on what happens to the chassis and the suspension. Now, when you have bad angle like that, that is multiplied. What we can do is we can drop this ball joint down. That will fix the lower control arm angle. It will help spread the load more equally between both ball joints to control chassis roll, and it will get away from the positive camber gain and it will give us negative camber gain, because now as this guy is going up, that's going to push the bottom of the tire out and it's going to suck the top of the tire in. So more muy buenos, that's what you want. You want that articulation right there, and it's going to help spread the load evenly between the control arms. It's going to fix the chassis load too, because say this is the right front suspension and you're making a left-hand corner. Okay, you got all that load that's hitting the tire. Now with the control arm angle like this and you go like this, what's going to want to happen is that load is going to want to suck the suspension up into the body. It's going to want to follow that articulation because it's hitting it and it already has that angle in it, so it's going to want to continue that upward travel, which then pulls the body down, suspension up, and that is what adds to body roll, is the control arm angles with lateral load. Probably getting all science and techie and geeky, but you know, I've raced circle track for years, and so all of this little technical stuff is just, it's intriguing to me. Now, I don't get to race a whole lot nowadays, but the science of it is pretty cool, and the geometry and everything. So dropping that lower ball joint fixed a lot of these issues. And I'll show you on patina. I set the camera down and I recorded and I undid the sway bar. So I unbolted the sway bar at one end, loosened my double adjustable shocks to where it has, you know, free suspension travel, and I pushed the suspension up and down. And you can see, not only does dropping that ball joint fix a lot of geometry issues, but with lowered cars, this is our control arm. So with our stock control arms, we have a, a bump stop in the middle, which then hits the chassis. So that is going to stop the suspension travel. Now with a lowered car, this is pretty much just kissing that. And once the suspension stops moving, that tire is going to take all of the load. It's basically like taking the spring out and putting a solid spacer in there. And so that tire is going to take all the load, which is then going to take load off of the other tire. And so now all the loads on one tire are trying to be, instead of being spread evenly. And when you stop the suspension travel, well, then the inner rear tire is not able to unload. And so it just goes into a push situation. No buenos. I hate it. I hate pushing cars. I'd rather have a loose car than a car that pushes, because you just feel so, I don't know, you feel helpless when the car's in a push. You're just like, you're having to back off the throttle, wait for the front end to start turning. Okay, then it catches. Then you can start picking up the throttle. Oh, but then it goes into a push again. If it's a little on the loose side, you can play with the steering with the throttle. It's more fun that way. But, and there's a happy balance. But when you drop that ball joint like that, the tire still stays in the same, this isn't changing. The distance from here to here doesn't change. What happens is it brings that frame farther away from the bump stop. So then we have more suspension travel. More suspension travel, free moving suspension, not only rides better, it handles better, and it will allow the suspension to do its job instead of just binding up and basically having a go-kart. Now, they do sell a dropped spindle. And all the dropped spindle does, it doesn't change any of your geometry. It doesn't do anything. All it does is raise the pin. So when you raise the pin, that's going to raise the tire up into the chassis and it lowers the car. Problem is, when you lower your car with the pin in the stock location, it's actually raising the upper control arm. So this is going up, which is beneficial in camber gain. That's what you want. They sell a 1 inch taller upper ball joint, and I actually have that on patina as well. I have a 1 inch taller upper and a 1.5 inch dropped lower. So problem with the dropped spindle, all it does is raise this 2 inches, but it doesn't change this. This is still in the same crappy position. And actually, if you do that, your upper control arm angle will be like this, because on a lowered car it's more like this. If you just do that, if you just raise the pin with on a dropped spindle, now you have the stock upper control arm angle, and the only benefit is this is more flat. So you killed one end, you gained it on the bottom, but that's not what you really want to do. What you want to do is you want to drop this so you can get the gain of both. You want the raised upper and you want the dropped lower to get the gain of both and have more suspension travel. Plus, the drop spindle does not fix your camber issue. This drop ball joint will fix that. Okay, I threw up some intelligence on the board right there. Now, this is all this bracket does right here. It just drops the ball joint. See, normally the ball joint would be bolted in that hole. Now instead it's bolted in this hole. Now, one thing it does do is it will space out your track width 3/8 of an inch. But not to worry, because now that you have the improved camber gain, when you go into the corners, it's actually going to pull the tire away from the fender and not push into it. So, muy buenos, beneficial, great all around. And this thing is super thick. It's 3/8 thick, and it has a 1/4 inch gusset on the side. So I'm going to sell the drop ball joint brackets for 350 bucks for the pair with the hardware and the washers, and it's a simple install. And I tried to take care of the shipping on my own last time on those hoist brackets, the engine hoist brackets. Oh, shipping sucks, man. So what I'm gonna having to make the labels and all that crap. So I'm just gonna do in eBay. I'm gonna sell these on eBay. That way, all I gotta do is hit print label. That's it. So it'd be simpler on my end. You know, eBay takes their portion, but it's simpler on my end. So I will have, these will be on eBay. You can just research B-body, and then these are made for 66 to 70 B-body. Now, I know the E-bodies share the same spindle, so it should work on an E-body as well. All right. Now, some of you are probably like, Chris, I have a question. How do I figure out my roll center, or how do I map out my suspension like you're talking about? Easy. Just get yourself 2 poster boards and tape them together, and then get it kind of centered on your front suspension and shove it up against your tires. So then what you're going to do, take it out of gear, and we are going to roll forward just enough to get onto the paper. Next, just get yourself a tape measure, a pen, and a plumb bob. You can get these at pretty much anywhere, any hardware store, Home Depot, whatever. And that is going to be what gives us our drop points. Locates the pivot points onto our poster board. Now it's going to be a little difficult to get in here and measure and show you how to do everything, so I'm just going to kind of do a quick explanation of it, and then I'll do it all off camera, because it's just hard to do it two-handed and try and stay out of the way of the camera. So you're going to take your plumb bob and you're going to put it in line with, it's hard to do this one-handed so you guys can see, but basically put it at the bottom of the grease circ on the ball joint. So put it right there, and you're gonna, and where it touches the poster board, see, I'm trying to get it, there we go. That's about as good as I can do this and stay out of the way of the camera. So now you take your pen and you're going to mark the location of that drop right there. All right, so that's one pivot point for the lower control arm and the outer ball joint. Now when you go to the inside, so to get the inside pivot point, we can just put this guy right in the center of the bolt for the lower control arm, and we drop that sucker down, yep, right there. Come on, you guys, stop moving. All right, so we are right about here. I draw 2 lines. I do like a 90 degrees, so that way it kind of gives me a center point. All right, now that's the same process for the upper control arms. So you guys can do that on your own. For the upper control arms, it's a little difficult to get that one because the inner pivot point is up into the strut tower. So just a little difficult to get that guy. Now, tape measure. So then we just go from the ground to our outer pivot point, and you kind of have to guesstimate about where the center of the ball would be for the ball joint. And so I assumed it to be right where there's like a body line here on the ball joint where it crests from flat to tapered. So I assumed that to be roughly the pivot point, which is exactly 10 inches. So on that, where that plumb bob was, I just put 10 inches. That is the location, and that is the height. Do the same thing for right here. We've got the location of where it is at on the K-frame and the suspension of the body and in between the tires. Now we just need the height. And we have roughly 9 11/16. Actually, we could just call that 9 3/4. It's closer to that. So then we just put 9 3/4, and that is lower inner ball joint. So I put LI for lower inner ball joint. So I got the location and the height. I've got the location and the height of the outer, so I put lower outer, just LO. All right, now I can do the upper. All right, now another difficult part of measuring the upper bolts. There's two different numbers because MOPARs have anti-dive in the upper control arm, which is the upper control arm doesn't sit flat like this. It sits like this. And so what happens is when you hit the brakes, that leverage pushes down on the tire with the brake force, which prevents the car from having too much nosedive on braking. Problem for us, we have two different heights on our upper control arm inner pivot point. So what I do is I get the lower, I get the rear, I get the front, and then I just average it out. And that's what I'm going to do right now. All right, so I've got my two numbers. We got 19 and we got 16 and a half. So half of that is going to be 17 3/4 for our average number. So and that's going to be our upper inner point. So we got our lower inner, we got our lower outer, we got our upper outer, and then we've got our upper inner. So we got all 4 points. And then the center of the tire is important, but we'll get that easy when we roll the tire off the paper because it'll leave a tire imprint on the paper. Now, patina already has 1 inch taller upper ball joints to help in that camber gain and to help fix some of the roll center issue. So it's not a direct stock versus the lower ball joint comparison because I've already got the uppers as an added benefit. And this is the non-dropped ball joint bracket side. So this is the stock lower control arm angles. The only difference is I have a 1 inch taller upper ball joint. All right, now this is the side with the dropped ball joint bracket. I'm going to do all the pinpoints for this on the ground real quick, but let me just show you the difference. So we had 10 inch on the other side, and we have 8.5 right there. And then the inner number will be the same. That upper number will be the same, and even that upper number will be the same. The only difference is the ball joint, and watch how much of a difference it makes. I'm gonna go ahead and get all my pinpoint locations. We got all of our points marked on the poster board. So we're gonna roll it back. That's good enough. Pop my 6-speed back in gear. Now, here comes the geometry. We're gonna go ahead and draw the ground. So this is where all of our numbers that we got, the height numbers, will be drawn from the ground up to our location. So that's the lower hour pivot point, which is 8.5 inches. So from right here, we go up 8.5 inches. I will show you. Remember what I was saying about the tire tread? Well, now we have the exact center of our tire tread. Line right there, line right there. So that's our lower outer ball joint. We line up our square on the asphalt, which is basically our ground, right there. And then we go, that number was 8.5 inches. So we're gonna go up 8.5, which is right here. And this is now where our lower outer control arm pivot point is located relative to the ground and the tire. So I'm gonna go ahead and do all my numbers real quick and then come back to it. All right, check it out. We have, what I have done here is the blue lines is what the stock suspension would have been like, the stock lower ball joint setup and the stock upper ball joint setup. And the black lines is the 1 inch taller upper ball joint and then the 1.5 inch dropped lower ball joint. So that's what the mapped out suspension would look like on both sides. So basically what I did is on the car, one side has the stock ball joint, one side has the drop ball joint, and so I just mirrored the image so that way we can compare the difference once I calculate the roll center. All right, and this is how we do this. So just take a long straight edge and basically extend your lines all the way out, and where the two lines intersect, that is where you draw a point right there. And then we go from the center of the tire from there to that point that we drawn, do the same thing over here, over there, and where the two tire lines intersect is our roll center. So they actually, so there is computer programs to do this for you, but most of you guys are not going to have that program, so I'm showing you how to do it on the ground. So I'm just going to draw a dotted line, extend it all the way out because I know it's going to take a while to intersect. Alright, then we go up here to the other blue line. Get him, Bobo. Oh man, they just barely intersected on this paper. Right there. Bolt's going ape shit. All right, now we can go from the center of the tire over here. Actually, we'll do it right here so you can see it better. We'll go from the center of the tire here to this point, pivot point over here from the two black lines. Where that black line comes and where that black line comes is that pivot point. So we go from the center of the tire to that pivot point, and that's going to give us our one intersecting roll center line. I don't need to draw the whole thing. And then we go from the same thing, center of the tire, to that guy right there, and bam, right here is the roll center. That is where the roll center of the modified dropped 1.5 ball joint and the 1 inch taller upper ball joint is at. And I forgot to mark that the K-frame itself is 5 3/4. So we'll go 5 3/4 there. We'll go 5 3/4 there. And that right here is the bottom of our K-frame. That is really good because the center of gravity on a big block MOPAR, you know, a B body, is probably about right here. I'm assuming this is about where the camshaft, actually no, just a hair above the camshaft. So let's assume the center of gravity is about right here on a big block MOPAR, because you know the crankshaft is going to be about right here. Yeah, that's about where the crankshaft's going to be. So the center mass of the entire car, not just the engine, the entire car, I would assume to be about right here. So that's just going to assume where it's at. And let me show you why that's good. Let me go ahead and finish the blue roll center, and I'll tell you why this and that is really good. This will give you a good idea on roll center. This is called roll couple. The difference between your roll center and your center of gravity. Now this is just a guesstimate, but I'm pretty sure my guesstimate is within that much. So this is just a rough, but this will show you. So this is the pivot point of the roll center, with which is the control arm angles and relative to the center of the tire. Now we're going to use that blue as, we're just going to do it in the center just to make it simple, but we're going to center it out with the blue, and that is basically going to be the mechanical leverage. So we got the center of gravity here, so that's the center of gravity. My hand is center of gravity, and that is the mechanical leverage on the body roll of the car. Now, since we altered the lower ball joint and the upper ball joint and got it to where it's more racing car, I just like saying racing car, it just makes it sound so much cooler. All right, now our mechanical leverage, see, that's the pivot point of the roll center on the racing suspension. Now this is our mechanical leverage. See how much shorter it is? That is much less mechanical leverage on the body for a body roll. So that is what? Let's check that number out. Roughly 6.5 inches of less mechanical leverage that the invisible ratchet will have on torquing. Wait, hold on. That the ratchet will have on torquing the body for body roll when it comes into lateral load, you know, cornering, all those lateral g-forces, all that stuff. This is all the gizmo fancy wizard science that goes into that. All right, now I've got to bolt on my other 1.5 inch drop bracket. These are the brackets that I designed, and I have a buddy make them for me because I don't have time. So he makes them for me, I sell them. So now I can have full racing car suspension design roll center on patina with the help of this little doohickey right here. Now I'm going to show you guys how to install this right now. It's actually pretty quick. Yeah, so you didn't need to take the torsion bar off or nothing. You don't have to disconnect any of the suspension. Just got to take the wheel off and unbolt the spindle from the ball joint. That's all you got to do. And then you get to install this part. Yep, this is the ball joint bracket. So there's two different bolt patterns on here. The rear one, that is a larger bolt pattern than the front. You want the larger bolt pattern facing the rear of the car, because what that does is it takes away some of the bump steer issues that these cars have. It's not going to get rid of all of it, but it cut it in half. So yeah, you can drop the bracket. You can actually change that bolt pattern if you want. You can oblong the hole, and you can fine tune your bump steer. That'll be another video, but just so you know, I've already taken care of half of the bump steer issue for you. Let's go ahead and slip this guy on. That's it. That's literally all you got to do. Bolt it in place. Now, there are some things you might have to grind, because not every single one of these castings is exactly the same. And if you notice, of course, this is the first generation of brackets I've made. Now the the revised one, we'll just go ahead and open that up a little bit more, so you guys wouldn't even have to scallop this. But I had to scallop this, knife edge it, whatever you want to call it, a little bit, and then you might have to grind away a little bit here, depending on your rotor spacing. Now, this setup is entirely different than what you guys will have. These rotors are 1.25 inches thick. This is something that I had made fit the car. These are some old NASCAR rotors that I had, and luckily the bolt pattern was the same, and so I put these on the Willwood hubs, and then I'm running my old Circle Track, you know, NASCAR Super Late model brake calipers, because they have much wider brake pads, and the calipers are just super heavy duty. So I have had to trim a little bit off of the side just because of the thicker rotor. You guys that have, you know, 1-inch rotors or 0.810 rotors, you're not gonna have to worry about it. But just in case, you might have to grind some of the gusset off of the side just to allow for caliper clearance. Let's go ahead and slip this on. Alright, we're gonna go ahead and slip the bracket on, and then put this guy back in place here. There it is. Okay. Now, you're gonna have to run longer 7/16 bolts just to accommodate the drop bracket. So I've already went ahead and got that right here. And then once you get this guy slipped in place, you have to slip 1 7/16 washer behind the bolt before it goes into the drop bracket. So it just goes right in between the spindle and the bracket, because there is a difference in spacing from the big bolt to the small bolt, and it's actually just that thickness, and these come with the kit. Now we can go ahead and start getting our 5/8 bolts in place. And there's no washers on the back side of these, so go ahead and throw a nut on that guy. Go ahead and throw the old nut back on the other one. The correct torque spec is good and tight. Alright, now we can slip our bolts that now hold the ball joint. That's it. You're done. Then you just got to put your rotor back on. Oh yeah, one-handed like a boss. Get the nut on. Tighten all that back up. Put your brake caliper back on. And you've officially been ball joint dropped. Racing car, yeah. Congratulations, you just got better racing suspension geometry and a better driver overall. Yep, even your bump steer issue has been cut in half. I likes it. Ah, Patina, we gonna hit the racetrack.
So you don't have to go out and spend $5,000+ on some aftermarket racing suspension, which some of those are pretty good. Now the coilover suspension kits, I'm still kind of leery on. You know, first of all, these cars were not designed to have coilovers on them. They weren't designed to carry the spring load on the front clip. Now, if you have reinforced the body to handle the spring load, then that's all good. But for the guys that just buy these kits and bolt them on, that front clip, that front frame rail was not designed to handle the load, and that inner fender definitely wasn't designed to handle load. So just food for thought there. And I also, you know, of course, I wanted to pitch this part that I designed and show you how it works and why you would want to use it. But it also wanted to enlighten you guys on the suspension of a MOPAR, why it sucks, how you can make it better. Now, if you're just a driver, daily driver, cruiser, you never autocross, road race, whatever, you're never going to really notice the difference. But if you are pushing your car to the limit on, say, those same things, then yes, you will notice. We have taken that ball joint drop bracket and we tested it on the Super Beater. Yes, one of the prior ratty autocross road race build cars. And for a car that had spool in the rear, and the only aftermarket suspension on the front of that thing was QA1 upper control arms, which still has the stock ball joint height on it. That car was amazing. We kept the stock front sway bar in it because, you know, with the drop ball joint brackets, you don't need as much sway bar, because now your control arms are helping you fight the body roll, and you don't need a massive sway bar to bind up the suspension. And that car was awesome through the corners. I wish it had a true track or a locker in it, because it would have been even better, but it handled really good. It allowed the suspension to slam down on braking. It allowed the body to roll and unload the rear tires, so that way you can actually make it through the apex without having to snap the throttle to get it to whip around, or wait and roll on the throttle because it's pushing. But yep, anyways, I've got things to do, and I hope maybe I have, you know, educated you guys on a few things with the MOPAR suspension. I love my MOPARs. The suspension, however, needs a tad bit of work, but it can be fixed on the cheap. Like them spinning tires, mother? Oh yeah, baby.